several years, I've combined my degrees in acting and somatic psychology to share my sustaining creativity techniques with performers. And now I've decided to share it with a bigger audience that includes you. I believe we are all creative, and this podcast is all about that. I'll be interviewing people from all backgrounds, ages, and creativity experiences to share just how creative we all are. Today, I'll be chatting with Angela Fowler, accessibility consultant and CEO of Real Life Access. Please enjoy Angela Fowler. Welcome to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. Today, I'm chatting with Angela Fowler, coach, accessibility consultant, speaker, and CEO of Real Life Access. Welcome to the show.
Well, good Monday morning, everybody, and thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Yes, I'm very excited to chat with you about creativity and how that shows up in your life. But before we get there, would you take a couple of minutes and let our listeners know a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Absolutely. So I'm Angela, like you said. I am an accessibility coach and consultant, and what the heck does that mean anyway? Accessibility basically means building a world that works for everybody.
Mm,
So, designing products and services and company cultures so that they are accessible, can be accessed by people with disabilities, and by extension, they're more user friendly for everybody, whether you admit to having a disability or not.
hmm I love that. So important. And how did you get into accessibility consulting, coaching, speaking? How did that all start?
Well, I sort of slid into it based on a couple things. One, I want to be part of the solution, by
Mm-hmm.
which I mean I'm totally blind. And throughout my life, I run into things that weren't accessible, and it's frustrating as heck, right? When you're trying to order a pizza,
Sure.
and you try to enter in your credit card information, and you can't use the payment screen.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing? I'm trying to give you money, and you're not letting me give you money. What business sense does that make?
Not a lot. Yes.
I want to be I want to be not the person that calls and yells at customer service, because that does absolutely no good at all, except
Mhm.
making you feel good for about 15 seconds before you start feeling guilty.
Mhm.
I want to be the one that talks to corporate leaders and teaches corporate leaders that this is where your problems are, because they don't know. They don't
Right.
know. Most people when was the last time you looked at your own website?
Well, fairly recently, but
You're the exception that proves the rule.
yeah.
Then you're good.
But
Most business owners, because they're so busy running their business, they don't look at their own website. They don't. They
right.
don't know, frankly, if the website has basic usability errors, much less accessibility flaws.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we're so close to it as business people that we don't see our own company culture. We don't see if our company culture is welcoming of difference or not.
Right.
Sometimes we get so caught up in HR-isms and procedures and this that we don't notice glaring flaws in our hiring process that inadvertently keep out people with disabilities. Nobody's
Mm.
deliberately discriminating, and if they are, they're not worth dealing with anyway.
Sure. Sure. Absolutely. Well, what a delight to get to teach people how to incorporate accessibility into their businesses so individuals, all individuals can access and participate. And I imagine it opens up a whole new opportunity for clients that they may not have ever anticipated.
Well, it does. People, like 25% of the population has some form of disability.
Hmm.
And people would argue that figure is even a little bit low,
Yeah.
because a lot of people that have disabilities either don't realize it or won't admit it. You can make the argument. Somebody was somebody was saying the other day, yeah, everybody has a disability. I'm geographically challenged,
Oh,
but I make
okay.
up for that with GPS.
Right.
Now, this isn't to minimize anybody's experience,
Yeah.
but it goes to show you that where we can mitigate the impact of disability,
Mm-hmm.
we can make disability less and less relevant.
I really like that. Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm curious, within your life and your work, when you think about creativity and being creative, what does it mean to you to be creative?
I'm not an artist.
Mm-hmm.
I can't draw a straight line if you gave me a ruler.
Sure.
And it's not just because I'm blind. A lot of blind people are artistic. I'm just
Yeah,
not.
fair.
But I hire other people to do that.
Knowing
Uh,
your strength is important, right?
yeah, but what I can do is I can conceptualize, this would be a really awesome visual thing to have, and this is what I want it to do, and this is what I want it to convey.
Mhm.
But creativity for me is a lot about creative problem solving.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more about that.
Well, when you can't see and the rest of the world can,
Mhm.
sometimes you get yourself in situations where you've got 15 things to do and your transportation decides it's not going to function that day, either because the buses are running late, or because Uber decides to not be available, or because the person who offered to give you a ride cancels at the last minute. So you have to figure out how you're going to get things done.
Mhm.
Um, if you've got a kitchen full of, full of spices that, they all look identical,
Mhm.
thank God they all smell different, you know,
True.
but you
Yeah.
have to figure out a way to identify those spices.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you're working a job and part of that job is inaccessible, you
Yeah.
have to figure out how to go up to your coworker and say, hey, you help me with this, I'll help you with this.
Right.
This way we both work, we're both valuable to the company, and we're even more valuable because we're working within our strengths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. So important to recognize the ability we all have for solving problems and how to collaborate and get that to benefit not just us in that moment, but other people as well. I
Yep.
love that. Yeah. So I can imagine you have faced many challenges in your life, not necessarily just being blind, but in just experience. I'm curious what maybe some of the specific challenges that you have had to navigate and how has creativity helped you navigate them?
Well, being a single mom, right? Um,
Yeah.
and my kid wasn't involved in that many extracurriculars, but he was involved in some. And I distinctly remember my mom was and continues to be really helpful in terms of transportation and getting everybody where they needed to go. Um,
Mhm.
but she deserves to take a vacation every once in a while.
Sure.
So she went out of state for a couple of weeks. My son was like 10 or 11,
Hmm.
and he had soccer practice and this and this. So, I called it Grandma Appreciation Week because I
Yeah.
had to I had to figure out how to get my son to all the things. Uh,
Hmm.
and I did. I did using a combination of drivers and public
Hmm.
transportation and whatever, whatever means I had available to me.
Yeah.
I got it done. Um, so being a parent, there's always stuff, right? I mean, your kid's schoolwork is always going to be in print.
Hmm. Yeah.
Well, that doesn't help.
Sure.
So, especially in his younger years, I mean his teacher, he had a couple of really cool teachers that really tried to make sure that that I was able to help him. They would email me his assignments, and in particular his spelling words.
Ah, yeah.
Third grade, you had spelling words. And these teachers would email me, and the best teachers, his best teachers, were he kept in really close contact with me by email, so I always
Mm,
knew what was going on,
yeah.
needed to be done. Um, and it was an informal arrangement, but it worked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, how amazing to have teachers do that for you
Yep.
and your son. I mean, I think that's the bare minimum people
And
can
and
do.
it really goes a long way. Now,
Yeah.
if they hadn't been able to do that, there's other ways of doing it, right? You either
Mm-hmm.
find somebody else to read the information. There's ways that you can scan the information and have the computer attempt to interpret what the text is.
Sure.
Sometimes
Yeah.
that works really well, and sometimes it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
But it's all about having a plentitude of resources at your disposal. So when a problem comes up,
Yeah.
you just, okay, how am I going to do this?
Right.
How am I going to solve this challenge? The the independent person thinks, how am I going to solve this challenge?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that involves help and sometimes it doesn't. But the first
Yeah.
question we ask ourselves is, how am I going to solve this problem? The person who has not achieved independence yet is going to ask, who's going to help me solve this problem?
Mm. Yeah.
Big difference.
Very different.
And it's
Absolutely.
it's not about whether you get help or not. It's about how you approach the problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice. I mean, it sounds like your experience of approaching problems and situations that need a solution and to solve them, it it something you've done from a very young age as well. And I'm curious, how old or what's your earliest memory of being creative in this fashion?
Oh my word. I think, oh wow. I think actually it was must have been like 5 or 6, and my grandparents got me this kids woodworking set.
Oh, uh-huh.
So I would figure out how to make small objects, and how to measure things, and
Mm-hmm.
how to hold the the wood in place so I could cut it with reasonable accuracy. When
Mm-hmm.
you're a little kid, you're not looking for perfection. You're looking for
Sure.
you're looking for done.
Yeah. Mhm.
But I think that really really set the stage.
Hmm.
Just getting in there and doing stuff.
Mhm.
Of course, my grandma was scared to death that I would amputate some extremity. Um, but I never did.
That's a plus. I think most grandmothers probably
It's a grandma thing.
experience
It's
that.
you
Yeah.
know it's in the blood.
Yeah.
I tell myself I won't be the same way when I become a grandma, but we all know I'm lying.
At least you're aware of that,
Yeah.
So how did these, early experiences of problem solving support you as an adult in starting your business?
Well, that's a beautiful segue, and it truly is a mindset.
Mm,
Um, each problem is different. Each business, each client is different.
yeah.
There are no cookie cutter solutions when it comes to accessibility.
Hmm.
There are components that we apply to just about every solution that we come up with,
Yeah.
but there are no cookie cutter solutions because each client's challenge is different.
Mm, yeah,
I
that makes
would much
sense.
rather sit with a client and work through some thorny, cultural problem
Hmm.
and do audit your website for screen reader accessibility. I will audit your website for screen reader accessibility, no problem there,
Uh-huh.
because that's something we do for everybody.
Hmm.
But my strength is in is in it's what differentiates us from every other accessibility company, right? We work with each client on a personal and on an individual level.
Mm-hmm. So important. As you were saying, everyone's challenge is different, and so that it isn't that cookie cutter. So how do you how do you get to know the client in through that lens, through that
You talk to them.
experience?
You talk to them. You develop a relationship with them.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I target smaller companies, right?
Yeah.
Um, First of all, nobody else is.
Mm-hmm.
And second, if I can sit down and have a beer with the CEO,
Yeah.
um, either literally or figuratively,
Mm-hmm.
or with the management team, it doesn't have to be the CEO. It can be somebody in
Yeah.
upper management.
Mm-hmm.
Really talk to them and really understand how their business works, how they serve their customers,
Mm-hmm.
what their pain points are.
Yeah.
Then I can customize not only the proposal, not only the quote, but I can adapt my own consulting.
Mm.
I mean, if I'm working with a real estate agent, I'm going to work with them a lot on different things than, say, an insurance company.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, that makes sense that you build that relationship and navigate it based on what the needs are of that particular company and organization. Yeah. How did you get, has business always been something you're interested in? Or is this, I know you said you kind of fell into the
Well,
consulting piece,
I've
but
always had the entrepreneur bug. You remember the woodworking set? No,
yes. Yeah.
I would make small items and sell them.
Ah.
Um, And when you're selling to your immediate family, the market is very limited.
This is
Uh,
true.
and
Yes.
the business really didn't scale the way that I, at the time.
Yeah.
When you've got two potential customers, the growth potential just isn't there. Um, but when I became an adult,
Mhm.
I discovered I had a real knack for making homemade beef jerky.
Oh.
And so between 2012 and the time that meat prices shot up into the stratosphere to the point where it just isn't sustainable to do it anymore,
Hmm.
um, I made and sold homemade beef jerky. And at the time, and I still do, I had a reputation in the blindness community. They trusted me.
Hmm.
So, I'd sell it at our conventions and things, and they would, tell other people, and
Hmm.
it spread that way.
Hmm.
Um, but marketing an accessibility company is a lot different from marketing beef jerky because I can hand you a bag of jerky, you can try a piece, and you can decide whether you want to buy it or not in that short a time.
Yeah.
Marketing something like this involves, and I'm coming to learn this the hard way, really
Mm.
involves a lot more client nurturing and a lot more relationship building. You have to if you buy a $10 bag of jerky from me and it sucks,
Yeah.
not the end of the world.
Right.
But if you pay me $10,000 for an accessibility auditing and fix your website and teach you about accessibility, and you
Hmm.
realize after you've given me that first installment that I suck,
Yeah.
then we have a problem, right?
Yeah, that is a different conundrum to
Yeah.
navigate.
So
Yeah.
so it certainly is about nurturing trust. It's
Hmm.
about building relationships, and it really is about building a referral network.
Mm. Yeah. That makes so much sense. That the woodworking that you're selling to two people, you know, you can't expand it as much as you can in the referral network of your real life access opportunities.
Probably should have refined the business plan on that one. Maybe implemented a system of quality control and
You could have,
maybe
but it
yeah,
sounds like
maybe
that entrepreneurial spirit did
maybe
start at a very young age.
maybe up my marketing game a little bit, but
This is true. This is true. Well,
but
yeah, go ahead.
in in all seriousness, it was really the first step, and the knowing, as a little girl, I can build something
Yeah.
and sell it.
Mm-hmm.
I can, as a blind person, I can create something that and put it on the market.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Yeah.
really planted the seed that would grow into um, the jerky business, and then eventually real life access.
Yeah. I love how things that come up in childhood in terms of creativity, how they show up in adulthood, and we can see that straight trajectory into
Yep.
that entrepreneur
Yeah,
experience.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And it looks like a silly little kid's, but and yeah, it is, but it's a lot more than that.
absolutely. Well, I'm curious, working with clients and consulting, meeting people who may not feel like they are creative or that creatively going about something is just too outside of their box for them. But how would you encourage others to perhaps find creativity in their life?
I think creativity needs to be more broadly defined than a lot of people do. Um,
Yeah,
when people look at creativity, they think of art.
right.
They think of drawing and painting and
Hmm.
all that stuff. But creativity is really about thinking outside the box.
Mm, hmm. Hmm.
And if you can do that
Hmm.
in any aspect of your life,
Yeah.
even if it's refining a process,
Hmm.
that involves creativity, right? Because you're challenging what's already there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's not about, am I creative?
Hmm.
It's, okay, in what areas am I comfortable being a little bit creative?
Oh, okay.
Some of us are more inventive than others, but
Sure.
even if you're not the inventive type, you can be creative in other ways.
Mm, hmm.
If you can improve on a recipe,
Hmm.
you're being creative.
Yeah. Okay. So, in terms of experiencing creativity and kind of refining the process and thinking out of the box, what are ways that you support your clients to do that when you're working with them in terms of expanding accessibility?
Well, I'll give you a perfect example. I ran a group coaching program for a few
Hmm.
nonprofit leaders a few months ago, and we took a fictional restaurant, a fictional yet realistic restaurant,
Hmm.
through its accessibility journey. And
Mm,
at each stage, I challenged them to come up with ways that they could make the business more accessible. Okay, how would you solve this problem?
hmm.
And it really led to some interesting discussion. If people are challenged, if people are empowered, if people are encouraged to, step off the treadmill for a minute and think about things, and take a big picture view of things, you'd be surprised what people can come up with.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that prompt and taking people through that experience and what it asks of them to really tap into their creativity around how to make something accessible. And yeah, what a great project.
And oftentimes it unleashes that creativity in other areas because that they 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 find muscles they didn't realize they had.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. How what it's I'm actually thinking, how fun. It sounds very fun
There
to
you go.
do. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I love it. Well, this has been such a treat getting to chat with you. I just have one last question. What does it feel like in your body to be creative?
Ooh, the word liberating comes to mind.
Ah, I love that. Yeah.
Because if I'm just doing, following up on emails and writing proposals and checking to make sure that the prices I'm good, all that boring administrative stuff.
Yeah.
It's like it feels good that it's getting done.
Sure.
But if I'm able to invent something, come up with ideas and really see a project being built.
Yeah. Hmm.
And if I'm able to take a problem and come up with a creative solution to it and really really come in and be the person that comes up with the solution.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's a good feeling.
Yeah, that is a good feeling. I love it. Well, awesome. And thank you so much for sharing all of these pieces with our listeners. If
Not a
people want
problem.
to learn more about the work that you do, how could they go about doing that?
They can go to www.reallifeaccess.com.
Mhm.
It has a contact form. It has all my socials. It has a bunch of information. Um, it has all the things.
All the things. Perfect.
All
Well,
the
I
things.
will add that to show notes so people have easy access and can find you. And thank you again, Angela, so much for taking the time to chat with me. I have thoroughly enjoyed our conversation.
Not a problem. Me too.
Thanks for listening to the Sustaining Creativity Podcast. We'd love to keep in touch, so follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We are at Sustaining Creativity. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Tag your friends and family so they can listen too. We love to hear from you, so leave your reviews, comments, and questions. Check out our website, sustainingcreativity.com, for upcoming offerings and creativity coaching. Tune in Tuesdays for our next episode. And remember, with creativity, anything's possible.